Good morning, everyone. I'm glad you're able to join us today. My name is Lori Keel, and I am the Program Manager for NAVAG and your host for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that this webinar is being recorded, and we will post this recording and the slide deck of Alan's on our website after the session. If you have registered, you will receive an email with a link to this recording in our content library once it is posted, so feel free to share it with others in your org who would be pertinent for watching it, and I will start recording it now. Again, welcome to this great session we have scheduled for you. We are excited to have Alan here today to present on What If Your Process is the Problem? Value Stream Mapping. This was one of the best attended sessions at Summit. We have the Best of Summit 2016 series that we have started doing just a few weeks ago. We have about 10 or 12 sessions that we are recording for those who were unable to make Summit or maybe wanted to join it again. Before we begin and have Alan come on, I have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to share with you today. We have some upcoming learning opportunities for you, so mark your calendar for future December dates. We have quite a few coming up in December and January that are already scheduled. You can see all of them out on the community pages of our navag.com, but make note of a few here. We do have some series like I shared, the Best of Summit. We have some Excel and some Microsoft Forecaster, as well as inventory kind of reoccurring series that we will be hosting over the coming months. Save the date. If you'd like to travel across the pond to Amsterdam, we have Summit EMEA coming up April 4th through the 6th. You can find out more information on summitemea.com. There is a lot of opportunities for you to get together with your peers and those who also use NAV and share some of your product insights. Registration is open for that, and Summit Nashville is coming up. We did start registrations last week, and so the first day we had quite a few register with the early bird specials. So if you know you can attend that next October, it's the 10th through the 13th. Jump on the website and let's get you registered for that. I know we just wrapped up Summit Tampa, and so this is 10 months away, but definitely, as Alan will share with you, worth the trip. Focus is coming up May 7th through the 12th in St. Louis. You can find out more information on about Focus on ugfocus.com. And just a couple housekeeping items. I am going to keep everyone on mute this morning. We will save questions until the end. If during Alan's presentation you think of a question, you can type it in the question box and I can ask it for you at the end. I will be unmuting everybody with the last 10-15 minutes or so. This will last about 40-45 minutes, and then you can ask questions yourself if you would like. With that, I'm going to pass the screen over to Alan here. It'll just take me a moment. And we show a lot of Alan's. I think a lot of people signed up with his link, so I'm going to try here, Alan. I think this one is you at the very bottom. We'll see here. If not, I'll need to try a couple others. And we have about 12 of you showing on the screen, Alan, so I'm going to try a couple different ones here. We'll start at the bottom.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Not sure how that happened, but... And I'll try the third. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. And I might have to, everyone is showing up as Alan this morning. Not sure how that happened, but And Alan, are you able to double click on your name and change it just to just Alan so then I can find which one is you?
Yeah. Let me... There. Oh, panelist me.
And what should you call yourself, Alan, when you renamed it?
See the panelist me?
Me?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, one moment. And it didn't update in mine to me.
So try the one right above that.
I don't see the one that says me, but just one moment.
Oh, no. There's one that says Alan Presenter in parentheses.
Okay, I got it. We'll flip over to that one.
I got it.
Thank you.
All right. So can everybody see my screen? Moving?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, folks. Not sure what happened there, but we survived it. So thank you all for attending. Want to kind of walk through value stream mapping and what we do when we do a business analysis and we try to help companies look at processes. So at the end, my contact information will certainly be there. We did have a really good response to this at Summit, so hopefully you'll be able to take away some good information from this. The goal here is to really talk about value stream mapping, what we do and how we do it, give you a picture of how you can use it in your companies, and show how the process actually works, what tools we use, tools of the trade, give some hints and tips as to how to do it, and eventually, while we do this for a service for customers, our goal is always to get our customers to the point where they can do these internally and they understand the basics of it, and it really allows them, when they've got an issue with a customer, with an internal process, to be able to take a day or a half a day and map it out and go, okay, how do we want to fix this? So we're going to talk about the different types of maps that we use. We're going to talk about questions that we probably ought to ask when you're doing these. Then we'll go through just a rough review of the process. And at the end of this, if there's any questions that anybody has, happy to entertain them. And like I said, my contact information will be at the end. So if something pops into your head, in a couple of days, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to answer it. So there's really three types of maps that we use. The first one I'm going to talk about is pretty much the standard flowchart map. And this one is what we would all kind of think of as an engineering map. It's got the standard starting point and ending point. It has process boxes. It has decision diamonds. So it's kind of a yes. And we got some kind of background noise going on, folks. So if everybody can make sure they're muted, I'd appreciate it. It's got alternative branches, and we've got just the general mapping flow that goes on. This is pretty much what people think about when they think about a flow chart. Any type of mapping, and it's kind of linear. I'm going to start here. I'm going to end here. May have a few branches that happen, but in general, it's a series of yes/no questions and processes that happen. One of the issues that can happen from the flow chart is that the branches can get pretty extensive, and it starts to get a little confusing to read, and it starts to get a little large. And so while you can follow it, it can be at times a little more complicated. Now the arrows do certainly help people, and as I said, most people, when they think of a map chart, they think of this type of chart. You can certainly use it. If your company is used to those, then by all means take advantage of that. The one that I've over the years started to really enjoy using is what's called a swim lane style map. And the idea here is that I'm going to break my process up into very small activities. And so at the beginning of each swim lane, and literally, if you think about it as you're looking down at a pool, we just had the Olympics last year roughly. You're looking down at a pool, you can see the swim lanes, people going up and down, and this is the view that you're going to get of the map, and I'll show you one in a second. But the activity is the start, and then you're going to talk about in that lane, okay, for that small activity, who's being affected? Who can be a person, it can be a department, it can be, a departmental process, it can be any kind of number of things, but who's being affected by it? The tasks. For this activity, what tasks or task am I going to be completing during it? And it's relatively small. Again, we're not looking at the whole process here. We're subdividing it up into very, very small pieces so we can analyze each of those pieces. When the task is complete, what happens? Because another activity is going to be spawned from that completed task. The system, is it computers, is it EDI, is it paper flow, is it somebody screaming at the top of their lungs? What's the system I'm going to use that is going to tell me this activity is taking place? And then finally, time. And time here gets a little strange in terms of how you define it. So the example I'm going to use for you is, let's say I enter an order. There's 20 line items on an order, and it takes me 5 minutes to enter the order. Well, you could say that the order time for that is 5. Okay, that's fine. But if I'm looking at how, maybe there's an approval process that goes with that, now my time may be a lot longer. So maybe I've got 5 minutes to enter it, but I've got a 30-minute downtime where the next activity is not happening because maybe that's approval of the header information, or maybe that's approval of the line item information, and that's not what I do. Then this activity, it's done in another one. So your time there may be 5 minutes, it may be 30 minutes, and that's a conversation you have, and it's probably the most complicated piece for people to kind of wrap their heads around is how do I structure that time. And you're not stopwatching here. This is not time motion studies like you would do on a plant floor. This is your best guess because nobody's really ever thought about that. And I'm going to bring up a swim lane chart here, and little tight, little small, but hopefully everybody can see this. You'll notice I have activity here at the top. So I've got to create the order, I've got to create the sales order header, create the line items, EDI validation. These are small activities that are happening as I do my order entry process. So in create the sales order header, who's involved? Well, the sales rep, the customer service person, the customer, EDI person, in this case it was an EDI person, inside sales. All these people can be affected from, either they're filling the information or they're going to be affected by the information during the activity of creating the sales order header. The task of that is I need to validate the order header. Is the task complete? Yeah, I validated all the data. Well, this is going to spawn something else. Maybe over here, hey, I've got a validated sales order, header has been created. Now I'm going to work down through other tasks on that activity. So this one got completed, it spawned this one over here. I've got orders, I got line items that are going to happen, so I'm creating the line items. This is an activity. In EDI, well, I'm creating it slightly different. Remember, EDI said, hey, over here it's being affected by a who, an EDI correction. So you'll see that while this is a little difficult at times for somebody who's never seen it before to start to grasp it, once you actually get one of these done, or one or two of these done, you'll start to understand the value of these swim lanes and how that happens. So it's another method. It may not be your chosen style, and if that's the case, that's fine. There is no yes or no to this. This is just how do we want to do it. A third style that people use is kind of a hybrid between a flow chart and a swim lanes. And in this case, you're kind of creating, instead of horizontal bands, you're kind of creating, instead of vertical bands, you're creating horizontal bands. You're using flowchart symbols, but the bands, and we'll see one here in just a second, the bands are more about departments and where things are happening and how they're flowing between those times. You've still got tasks, you've still got who's, you've still got time, but it's, it's easier, sometimes easier for people to kind of mix and match these two styles and see what that process is and track it a little better. And this is an example of the hybrid. The customer puts in a purchase order to us. Well, the first department it hits is customer care or customer service. Well, that drives, hey, I got the order, now that drives order entry. Here the purchase order is being sent by phone or fax or email. In either case, I got order entry. My first department's customer service. The order, I'm going to send back a confirmation, and you can see the arrows happening here along those lines. After that, I've got purchasing and manufacturing. I need to run the MRP and see that I have demand. Purchasing needs to make sure we forecast it properly, and so you can kind of see the multiple departmental flows. What I would say here on this particular style, this one's a little bit broader picture and probably slightly higher level than the previous one I showed you, but because here we're looking at a lot of other departments. But it's a different picture, a different style, better ways to see the same information. Again, the goal here is to get this information up in a format that people can look at and go, do we really do that or don't we do that? So, the maps vary from organization to organization. You can do it, but the purpose in value stream mapping is how do I do it today and how do I want to do it tomorrow? So you see on point 2 there, my current state. What am I doing today? How do I do this? And you really have to sit back. And the reason I say it may take a day and you have to be careful how big of a picture you're trying to draw is when people really start talking about this stuff, they start bringing up topics or points or functions that nobody thinks about because you just do it every day. And one of the biggest dangers in doing value stream mapping is you just go over the same, you're so used to doing it you don't think you do it. And that's where the facilitator really has to draw that information out. During the current state, as you're building that, when somebody says, yes, I do this, and everybody else looks at them and goes, why? You know what? That's a time to circle that and go, maybe this is waste that we don't need to do. I'll give you an example of a company I worked with. We did several different processes, but one of them was order entry. And this customer, order entry, put the order in, printed it out, stapled it to the incoming PO from the customer, checked it all off manually, turned it into their customer service manager. The customer service manager took it, brought it up on their screen, double-checked everything, highlighted anything maybe they thought was hinky or out wrong or they wanted changed. If they had found something, they sent it back to the customer service person for correction. Customer service person would correct it, print out another copy, so now we have 2 copies of the same order flowing around, send it back to customer service manager. The customer service manager would once again do exactly the same thing she had done before, and if that was okay, staple a new copy that she had approved to it, send it up to top management. Top management wanted to review every order. So they would now do, you guessed it, pull it up on the screen, look at the same order, mark anything they didn't want, which would go back to customer service. If it was okay, they would say it's approved, and then eventually would release it to the floor. Now, if you think about this, that company handled and double-checked that order at least 3 times, and that's for a perfect order. If the order had issues or any questions, they would do it multiple times, 6, 8 times, because it kept flowing back and forth. Handling an order, and we sat and talked about this for a while, and we eventually brought in top management when we saw all this. But handling an order that is perfectly acceptable and good and doesn't need any help 3 times, I would call that waste. I would call that lost time. And come to find out, frequently it took orders 3 days to get through the system, just to the point where it could be released for shipment, because it was flowing back and forth through this kind of paper trail. When we showed that to top management, they were adamant, we don't do that. I was like, yeah, you do. Hate to break it to you, but you really do this every time. Which then led us to, okay, let's create a future state map where we don't do that anymore. How do we do that? When we started identifying programmatic changes that would help people be able to see just the exceptions. If the order's good, it's good. It's not kind of good. It's either good or it's not. It's binary, right? It's yes or no. If the order's good, send it. If it's not good, fix it. And most of that could be done right at customer service entry time, and you could eliminate the rest of the processes. So it helps, current state and future state really helps you identify these things. When you've got them both up on the screen now, or both up on the wall, and you're looking at them, this is the ideal time to look at all those steps and go, what really is a problem? What constitutes waste? And you have to define waste. Is it time? Is it physical dollars in terms of paper usage, or people walking back and forth, or missed shipments, or I'm calling the customer 4 times? What is waste? And we always say look at it from the user's perspective. When we talked about that example I just gave you, how much time was wasted from the customer services person's time? It could be eliminated if we just made sure the system properly identified those orders which were okay and those orders which needed review. Because 98% of the orders were fine. Well, why am I wasting time on that? That's time. And what we found in that particular example is if we actually instituted some of the things that we put into the future state map, we actually saved 40 man hours a week, one whole person, to do that. Now, did they eliminate head count? No. And I do this. I say this every time I give one of these speeches or give a session or a webinar. ERP systems and improvements and value stream mapping are not designed to cut people from your staff. It's not going to happen. Stop thinking it's going to happen. If you think it's going to happen today, it's not. What you're going to get out of it, though, is the ability to do more with the same. So now suddenly I can take 50% more orders in because I just saved 1 or 1.5 people's time during the week. Or I can say, look, I can actually move that person out of that department, do more orders with less people, and now focus that person's time on something that really would benefit the company instead of pushing paper. So you want to look at and be creative when you're thinking about where are my savings, how do I do these things, and what's my gain. So the emphasis, is not always just on how do I do things better, but it's, why am I doing these things, and what's the purpose of that? And I'll give you another example. A friend of mine was doing a value stream mapping episode 6 or 7 years ago with a company, and it was a food processor, and they had all the manufacturing people in the room, and they were talking about process flow. How do the order comes in, what do we do, how do we, and as they were talking through it, and they were talking with the people on the floor, some of the guys that were in the room, it got to one particular person. He said, and then once I get the order, once we get the information in the system, I enter it into the spreadsheet. And everybody was quiet for a minute, and then finally the facilitator said, well, what do you do with the spreadsheet? He goes, well, I put it up on the network drive in this folder. Okay. And kind of looked around the room. He said, who uses that? Nobody in the room used it. It was crickets. I was like, I don't know. Nobody knew about it. And so I kind of looked back at the guy that was making the spreadsheet and said, how long have you been doing this? And he goes, well, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, ever since Fred, or whatever the gentleman's name was, the previous plant manager, was here. He goes, well, why'd you do it? Well, he wanted that because he thought it helped him keep track of whatever the function was. He says, well, but that guy hasn't been here for 4 years. Well, yeah, I know. I just assumed somebody was using it. It took him 15 minutes a day to put the spreadsheet together. So 15 minutes times 5, we can all do the math. We got a minute, an hour and 15 minutes of this guy's time we're paying him for every week to do something that nobody uses, nobody even knows exists anymore, and is utterly pointless. Now that's a savings, right? He's got 15 minutes a day he can do something else with. You've identified that now through the mapping routine. I mean, the next words out of the Vice President of Operations' mouth were stop. Just stop. Don't ever build that spreadsheet again because nobody knows it exists. It's silly to do that. So you go through and you start identifying the things that people do that they may assign value to because they don't realize that nobody else in the world even cares about it. And if it really doesn't need it, you're not slapping these people. You're just going, look, you don't need to do that anymore. It's silly to continue because We have a better way to do that. We don't know it's being done, whatever it is. And that kind of takes us to the last bullet point on this slide, which is when you've built your current state and when you've built your future state maps, your future state map, you should end up with a list of things that you want to do. And we've, put them into three major categories: do-its, events, and projects. Well, the do-its are what the name implies. Just do it. Okay? Stop building the spreadsheet. I don't want the spreadsheet anymore. Just stop. It doesn't take a budget. It doesn't take a lot of meetings. You're not changing a process flow. Everybody's sat there. They've had one conversation. They've all agreed that, yeah, this is silly. Stop. You just do it. You're done. And I'll give you another example. Another company I was working for, they had a lot of returns that came back on a regular basis, and their industry required that because it was 100% guarantee, and that was fine. The orders, because their salespeople were out in the field doing the return, they would key it into their phone, a nice little app for that, send it back, come in kind of EDI, NAV would pull it in, and it was great. But the line item numbers on a return could be anywhere from 2 items to 100 items. It just kind of depended on what was going on. The return would end up in NAV, but as we were talking through it, the people said, customer service people went, yeah, and then we go through every line and we change the location from 1 to R. You have to do every line. And I kind of looked at them and went, what? And they said, yeah, because it comes in with a 1, and that's the wrong location. Once again, I kind of turned my chair and looked at programmers, and I went, why are we doing that? Well, because that's the default. Okay, got that one. Looked at the customer service people and said, how long does that take you? Well, we get X amount of returns a week, and we have this amount of time to do it, depending on the line items. Everybody probably loses an hour and a half a day on this. And I looked at one of the managers and I said, is it possible just to have the returns come in with the right code? And the programmer, the manager went, yeah, sure. And the programmers went, yeah, that's not a problem. It'll take us about 3 minutes to do it. And I really kind of thought the customer service people were going to leap across the table and strangle the programmers at that point, because they had spent the last 2 years doing this manually. Come to find out, they had put this in as a request a long time ago, and it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. And nobody came back and went, hey, would you mind fixing this for us? That ended up becoming a do-it. There was no conversation. Change the program to just default from a 1 to an R, and everybody's happy. Guess what? They did it that day. I mean, actually the guy got up about an hour later, walked out, came back about 5 minutes later. He says, okay, it's done. But we identified a huge savings for these people. So a do-it is just something you can do. You don't have to discuss it. You don't have to meet about it. Events are a little more complicated. You've got, hey, we're going to change a process, but you know what, let's have a quick couple of meetings just to make sure we're not missing anything here. There's no real major cost involved, maybe a small programming change with my reseller, but yeah, I mean, this is relatively simple, but let's just make sure we've talked through this as a company and we agree to it. So maybe you've got a couple of meetings, you got a couple other people you brought in, but again, it's still relatively small, minor, not a major deal, and you can make the change. A project, on the other hand, those are big. Okay, that may be as big as we need a warehouse management system. We're manually shipping all this stuff. We have to stop. We need bigger. Well, now we're into, okay, what's the ROI? What's the software cost? What's the implementation? How do I go through the selection process? Or maybe I need a forecasting system that's better, or maybe I need to fundamentally change the way I price stuff. And these are large considerations for the business and how the business runs. And so now we're into a lot more meetings, a lot more design, a lot more care, if you will, because the wrong decision here is worse than no decision. And so that's where you're getting, if you use a reseller or a consultant, you're getting them involved. If you do most of this in-house, you got your own programming and IT staff, and they can make, you're using them, but you're spending time with this and making it happen. So, again, you're going to end up with things under each of these categories: do-its, events, and projects. So the process, we've kind of gone through it, but the process is relatively simple in concept. In execution, a little bit more complicated, but you're going to end up with, on a wall, a current state map. This is what we do today. On another wall, you're going to end up with a future state map. This is what we would like to do. And then my findings, any discussions I want to write up, but then things I can just do to save events and projects. And I would highly recommend that when you create these do-its, events, and projects, you assign a time savings to that. I'm going to save X this way. I'm going to save an hour a week this way, and then track it. Go, did I save my hour? Maybe I saved 15 minutes and not an hour. Maybe I saved 3 hours. Maybe I didn't save anything. You want to know why and what, but you also want to justify why these things are happening. Because when you do that, down the road, when you want to do more of these mapping routines and you want to dig into more of your processes, people are going to buy into it better, and they're going to feel better about it, because you know what? We really did accomplish something the last time we did order entry, the last time we did purchasing. So you want to put some value to it. So let's talk for a little bit about the current state map. Unless you're an ISO company, and truly an ISO certified company or certified in some other process control, normally when you start looking at a process, whether it's manufacturing, purchasing, warehousing, shipping, whatever one you want, you're going to find a lot of the functions simply either aren't documented at all, or they definitely are not well documented. We don't, we do this, but we're not sure. Well, I passed that off to Sally Joe. Well, okay, nowhere in there is do we know A, who Sally Joe is, and B, what she's doing with that particular order, that particular drop ship requirement. You're going to find a lot of functions don't really have clear delineations or boundaries or responsibilities. Who's responsible for it? Well, I don't know. It just kind of goes there. Okay, not a good answer. A good answer from a current state, because you want to identify that. A bad answer from a future state, because your goal is not to create silos, but it certainly is to go, when this happens, it goes here. This is my next step. There's value associated with it. I'm good to go. We're set. And that kind of leads to the value and the waste piece of this. When I look at steps, would the customer accept that I'm doing that step? Remember early on I gave you the example of the multiple touches on an order. If I told a customer I did that without any really good reason, and it's not a good reason to say I have to do that because I want to make sure the order's right. Hey, the customer's paying for that, right? I mean, in some way, shape, or form, I'm charging them. My P&L, I got to cover the costs of that. Well, is the customer willing to pay for that? If you actually owned up to that, would they do it? And then in administrative processes, trust me, there's all kinds of hidden costs. Remember the R versus 1 location? Nobody said anything about that, but it was taking time. How long does it take to process an accounts payable? How long, how much is, what does my cash flow look like, and how much over do I have, and what's my process for tracking that down and collecting on that? Cash flow is king in any business. When you do a current state map, you want to complete it in a day. You really want to try to do a day, and that forces you to go, I can't look at too big of an item here. I can't look at from the minute the order comes in until I invoice it and include my manufacturing process, my shipping process. I mean, even for a tiny little company, that's a big set of processes. You may say, look, I want to do order entry, but I want to go from when the order comes in until the point I can release it to the floor. This side of the wall, there's a wall that's got the administrative and office functions. You got operations functions. I'm on the administrative side. I'm still in the office. I'll take it up to the wall. Let's do that one. And I'm just that. And then maybe I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to look at invoicing. It made it to the wall. We passed it through the wall. They shipped it. It's come back. What's my invoicing process? Or maybe it's shipping and invoicing. but you're breaking these into component parts that allow you to spend the time in a day to be able to realistically get through and map that out. A day and a half at the most, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Just logistically, when you do these things, people have to devote time to it. Guess what? They're also having to do their other job. So they have to be able to devote 8 hours to this. They can do that once maybe in a week, but not multiple days. It's difficult. There's just a fatigue factor that goes on when you're doing one of these during the day. People get tired. So you want to kind of work through that process. When you've created your team that's going to help you create this current state map, you want to be careful of a couple of things. First, do not ever choose any C-level managers or owners or that type of thing. What's going to happen is they're going to get in there and everybody else is going to shut up. And they're going to say what we do. The CEO is going to go, well, this is how we do an order. Or, the people who actually do the orders and really know what's going on, they're just going to agree with him, or they're going to say it like he wants to hear it, or she wants to hear it. Keep those people out of the mix. You can bring them in for questions. You certainly would bring them in at the end of it when you have a current and a future state. And you want to surprise them with the stuff you're going to find because they're not going to believe you. And then you're going to have to defend it. But if they're there, they're going to take over. It's their nature. It's what happens. It's just the way business is. Use middle managers and a mix of middle managers and people who do it on a day-to-day basis. They really understand it. One of the things I tell customers all the time when they're talking about training for software, go talk to people who, talk to friends who also use Nav that do it on a day-to-day basis. They know the ins and outs of it, as well as any trainer does because they use it every day. So you really want to be careful on this team. You also want the team to be from different departments. You think about something like order entry, and I use order entry a lot in this because people can grasp that one fairly easy. Think about all the departments order entry affects. Accounting, customer service, sales, inventory, manufacturing, shipping. These people are all being affected by that order. It's good to have some of those other departments, knowledgeable people in there to say, well, yeah, you do that all the time, but guess what? It causes me all these problems. Those are good conversations, and in the end, you get a real good picture of what is really happening, and you're able to identify some of those places that people look at and go, I've got an issue here. We need to circle that, and in our future state map, we need to have that conversation. You really want people who know how you do it today. Okay, you don't want dreamers. You want to go, look, I do this every day, all day. Trust me, this is how we do this. And it's important to accept the information those people are giving you. You want to challenge it, but you want to accept that information. When you're mapping this out, ask these questions in this way. Okay, I have to bring a bunch of returns back. Why? Do we have product problems? No. What is it? It's an industry requirement. It's a barrier to entry. I have to do this. I don't have a choice. Okay. I have to build this spreadsheet. Why? I have no clue. Guess what? That one goes away. That's the kind of stuff you want to talk about. But, what are my competitive advantages? Maybe we think a competitive advantage is I get the order in, I get it into the system and confirmation back right away within 5 minutes. It's just cool, but it's not a competitive advantage. Is it a competitive disadvantage if my confirmation doesn't come back till the end of the day? Well, yes, it is. Okay. Then that's a barrier to entry in the process. But if nobody cares, if the customer goes, look, well, the industry in general goes, I don't know, confirmations in a day is fine. Okay, well, am I doing a lot of work to get that confirmation back to them that I can change the way we do it and I don't have to spend extra time doing that each time? It's just an example, but it's the way of thinking at things when you look at that that current state map and identifying and maybe marking them as to go, when we talk future state, let's talk about how quick we need to get confirmations back. We talked about this a little earlier. Would the customer pay me more to do what I'm doing? Or would they say, please stop that and give me a price break? That, really is an interesting way to look at questions. When I have to do something, why am I doing that? Maybe they'd say, stop doing that, become more efficient, and then give me a price break. Obviously you're rarely going to go ask your customers about your internal operations, but if you look at it from the customer's perspective and go, does it make sense? Do I want to pay this vendor to do these things just so I get my product right? No, probably not. So you can look at that. Any of these things that come up that people suggest, there's no reason not right then and there when it pops onto the wall, and you go, why are we doing this? Could we eliminate this? Let's just put an X on it if we think we could eliminate it. We'll talk about it later on, but could we change this or could we eliminate it? And does the task touch the customer? Are they willing to pay extra for it? Sometimes we can gain profit by going, you know what, nobody else in our industry does that. We do it, it costs us a little more, we can get a premium for that. I don't know what that is, but look at your business and go, I could get half a cent per pound more on resin if I did that. And maybe it's, reviewing their inventory. Maybe it's tying into their system. Maybe it's carrying a little stock on the floor. We get a little extra 2% bump. Guess what? Doesn't cost me anything to do it. And, that's 2% from that order that just went to my bottom line because that's free money. I'm getting a gain on that. So it goes both ways, right? It goes savings, waste reduction, efficiencies, but it also goes, hey, competitive advantage, gains. Maybe I can charge a tad more. So when you do the future state, you want to basically, again, try to complete it within a day. Same team, don't change the team, because these people have now gone through what their business is, how they do it. They've talked through this process. They've got the knowledge. They've learned from each other. They've already did, they had a rapport before when they came in because they work in the same business, but they've developed a little more rapport, or an argument, and they can go back to it. Throw somebody in there brand new, they're not going to have a clue what's going on. So you want to work with the same team. You want to, in the end, how do I do things better, faster, cleaner, less expensive? That's what your goal here is. How do I make my business better? How do I push dollars to the bottom line? In the end, short of the nonprofits, we're all in business to make money. How do I take these savings and gain it? And the savings may be savings that go to my bottom line. It may be, hey, I can reduce my price by 2%, put 3% more on the bottom line, and gain sales, therefore get more on the bottom line because I was able to come out with a more competitive advantage from a pricing standpoint. A variety of ways to look at your future state. But these are all things that lead to the inevitable, which is I need more sales, I need more profit. How do I do it? Again, how do I do it more with less, more with the same? How do I turn my inventory faster? All of the things of the future state map should help you gain. Obviously, eliminating waste. Obviously, cutting down the silos, minimizing the handoffs. Remember the 3 reviews of the sales order. It should never happen. Stop it. You don't need that. And that kind of goes to triggering resources only when you need them. If the process, the activity is right, if you can gauge your system to go, look, identify the exceptions. If everything is within norms, if the parameters fit, if the plus or minus is okay, I don't want to see it. I'm good. Those things I don't care about. I only want to have to deal with things. I only want to have to escalate it when I've got an exception. That's what your future state map is for. And again, it's going to drive you back to the do-its, the events, and the projects. But when you quantify those and you go, this is how much money I'm going to save, or this is how much gain I'm going to get, then you're going to see a savings and you're going to work from that standpoint. And that puts value associated with your future state. So tools of the trade. Again, pretty simple, but you need a large room with a lot of wall space. You just do. And you're not going to use whiteboards, you're going to use post-it flip charts because you're going to wallpaper these walls. And I found that works the best because you can obviously stick them up. We all know what I'm talking about. And just paper the wall, and one wall or 1.5 walls is going to be your current state, and another 1.5 is going to be your future state, and everybody's going to be able to look and see what it is. I like to take 3x5 Post-it notes. They're nice size. I can write on them. I usually have people around the table doing the writing so that, you know, other people are involved. And, you know, maybe in those Post-it notes are activities, the who's, the what's. If you're using a flowchart style, you know, it's my decision points, it's my process boxes, it's my start, my end point. But you're putting them up there. The reason for the Post-it notes is if you just write directly on the paper or directly on a whiteboard, you can't move it, right? You now have to erase or scratch through it and change. Post-it notes, you can take them back off and slide them around. You do it, and trust me, I do a lot of that. We get going, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, we forgot about this activity. You know, okay, so everything kind of shifts over, and you have to make your adjustments. And you know, simple black Sharpie markers, you know, that are easy to work with, easy to write with. People can read it. My writing is atrocious. I usually try to pick somebody whose writing is decent, but having everybody write in the room actually kind of brings them into the fold a little more. They're paying attention a little more. Two things I don't list on here that I like to have is kind of that blue painter's tape, because I can stick that to walls, you know, and not tear off their paint, obviously, and then just Scotch tape to help tape the Post-it notes to the paper, because I've had cases where I've rolled it all up to go back and put it into a nice Visio and found out all the little 3x5 cards fell off, and that's not a good thing. And finally, you know, while I'm not overly thrilled with this picture, and one of our guys named Jeff Bergalsi took it, and I still yell at him today for it, this is my stance, if you will, when I'm doing one of these. And you'll notice behind me, I've got the flip chart stuff up on the wall. You got all of these little Post-it notes floating around. But I'm sitting in a chair, and I'm kind of back from the group, and I'm trying to let the group talk. And one of the keys in this, when you're doing this internally, or you're doing this for a customer, or whatever it may be, the group has to develop a dynamic, and they have to talk among themselves, and they have to drive these conversations. Your job is to keep the arguments, the true arguments, to a minimum, direct them correctly, ask the stupid questions. I mean, the beauty of what I do when I go in there is I don't know their business. So I can ask all kinds of dumb questions, and nobody thinks a thing about it. People who are in there all the time, you know, they may just assume they know the answer to that, so they don't even ask the question. You've got to really kind of drain your brain of anything you know if you're going to lead one of these, and ask the silly questions. Why do you enter it that way? Why do you make that spreadsheet? Why do you do these things? Why do you put them all in a folder and take them down to manufacturing? Why can't they just look at it on the screen? Really drill into this, and it's a lot of conversations, folks. I mean, that's why it's a day and a half to do some small processes, because you're sitting back and you're letting the dynamic of the room build and letting the dynamic of the room drive the conversation. And while, you know, it looks a little crazy with all those Post-it notes on it, once I draw the lines between them, we get into swim lanes. But in the beginning of this, for the first half of the day, I mean, I got Post-it notes everywhere, because you know, we're coming up with things, kind of stream of consciousness type stuff. Other notes are happening. We're you know, never not write something down would be one of my keys to you. Always write it down. You can always throw it away, but you can't see it from this picture, but on the other side of the door, I had a parking lot spot. Somebody brings something up, I wasn't sure what to do with it, so I would just stick it in the parking lot. And we'd kind of periodically look at the parking lot and go, okay, do we want to deal with this or not? Is it something we need to talk about? So, you know, again, this was not a training session per se on value stream mapping. It certainly was an attempt to give you a picture of how, you know, we at Innovia do these. Maybe give you an idea of how you can utilize it in your own business, and an attempt to, you know, get you to realize that, you know, you can do these on your own. Maybe you have somebody come in and do one for you, and you get good at it, or you understand the process, and then you try to start doing them on your own. You take little bites, but this is the constant improvement that companies are looking for. You know, this is the stuff, I've been doing it this way for all my life. We need to change it. And I'll leave you with one story that I've never really figured out if this is true or not, but it just really fits what I do for a living, so I always tell it. You know, there's the old story about, you know, the husband and the wife, and they're in the kitchen, and she happens to be cooking that night, and she takes a roast and cuts a third off of it and puts it in wrap and puts it in the refrigerator and then bakes the other 2/3. And the husband says, you know, not being a cook himself, he goes, why do you do that? And she goes, I don't know, my mom always did it, and it cooks better. Okay. So, you know, later on they're over at the in-laws, and he goes, hey, you know, I noticed she cuts a third off of that. Why does that happen? She goes, I don't know, my mom always did that. It cooks better. No, really? Why? I don't know. It just, you know, I just know you got to cut a third off of it. And finally, they happen to, Grandma's still alive, you know, luckily, and they talk to her, and she goes, well, why are you doing that? She goes, oh, I don't do that anymore. Why not? Well, early on in my life, you know, I had a roasting pan that was too small, and I always had to cut a third off the roast so I could fit it in there, and then I'd cook the other part later on. You know, and you listen to that story, and again, whether it's true or not, it's just a good story about business. Why do we do that? You got to ask that question. Why do we do that? You know, the spreadsheet, the 3 checks on the orders, those are real. Okay, that's not the roast story. Those are real things that people were doing, and when we started asking why, everybody went, okay, stop. This is what we want to do. We're going to get better because of that. So with that being said, I think we're in pretty good shape on time. Looks like we got about 10 minutes left. I am happy to entertain any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to unmute everybody here. I need to do them here one at a time. So we'll get everybody unmuted. I don't have any questions yet in the question pane. If you have any questions, you can type them in there, or you can ask them here yourself. And I had a laugh at that story, Alan, that you just shared. I put brown sugar in my hamburger when I fry it, and my mom always did it, and we did ask her why once, and she said because she used deer venison a lot, and took the gaminess out of it. So a similar story that I was laughing out loud, but I was muted. So
we've all got those stories.
Creature of habit, right? So if anyone has any questions, I have unmuted everybody except for one. I wasn't able to unmute them. They must have muted themselves. So if you start talking, if we don't hear you, raise your hand, and I'll try again. But
well, good. I'm glad I was perfect and solved everything for everybody.
Thank you so much. And if we don't have any questions, we'll just wait here another minute or so.
And like I said, folks, certainly feel free to email me if something pops into your head later on.
We'll do that. Thank you, Alan. And I'd just like to remind everyone to make sure that you take advantage of asking questions out there on Collaborate in the NAVAG Open Forum. We have such a wonderful, helpful community that you're sure to find any answers you may be looking for there, or there may be some terrific questions that you have that you can type out there, and there's people are always quick to supply answers. We are all here to support each other, and like Alan, thank you for volunteering to do this, not only in Tampa at Summit, but again for all of us to listen to.
My pleasure. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
You bet. Well, with that, I'm going to end today's session, reminding everyone again that this is recorded, and you will receive a link to the content library shortly where we will post this. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. We will see you on another webinar real soon. Bye for now.